Worcester. We've been watching Sparks back against the Diamonds. They've made 214, and we will see whether Diamonds can chase it down shortly. But Sid, we've been watching a lot of cricket this week. We're getting to our busy period of the summer, aren't we? So it's been 2 ODIs, England against South Africa, and England have been victorious in both of those matches so far. The third one coming up next week. You'll be there, I'll be in Birmingham for the Commonwealth Games prep, but we'll be watching on from afar, so we'll see whether England can make a clean sweep of it. But the first match at Northants, I'll talk a little bit about that first. Thought it was really interesting to see Brunt back in the team, because we did speculate in last week's podcast about whether she was going to actually be able to regain her place, but they decided that she was worthy of giving her that game, and she certainly seemed quite fiery. There was a lot of talk, because I wrote in my Guardian piece about the fact that she was frustrated not to have played in the test, and people were saying, but she'd retired. Yes, she did retire. However, it did seem to have been presented to her as it's the test or the Commonwealth Games, and you can bet that she really wanted to be out there playing in that test match, and I think that we saw some of that fire and that frustration really being let out in her opening spell in that first ODI. Of course, for England in that match, the really big, delightful performance to see was Emma Lamb making her international 100. Also happened to be the first runs that she'd ever made for England in white ball cricket, and interesting that she just kind of seemed to come out and forget all about that. There didn't seem to be very much pressure on her shoulders. She didn't look particularly nervous, she just looked very calm and assured, and of course then followed it up in yesterday's match, the second ODI at Bristol, with a 50. Just looks so at home in international cricket.
Yeah, I think I said about Lamb a couple of weeks ago that I had every confidence that she was going to settle in international cricket, and that the runs would find her when they came, and they've come pretty quickly. I mean, making 100 in your third ODI, is that correct? The fourth white ball match, I think. And a really assured performance, as you say. It really looked like she was born to be there. I think there's perhaps like a degree of fortuitousness in the sense that both her and Sophia Dunkley have come up against a South Africa side that kind of perhaps playing the role that Pakistan played in 2016. Do you remember being here in 2016, Raf, which was the kind of summer of Mark Robinson's, the resurgent England that ultimately led to them winning the World Cup. And they came here to Worcester and some quite short boundaries, and Nat Silver smashed it all over the place. Tammy Beaumont had been making runs, Lauren Winford had been making runs, and suddenly those players had a degree of confidence that they'd never had before. And I wonder if South Africa playing that role and giving Emma Lamb that confidence, because she came out again and she was batting at 100 right through, a strike rate of 100, and that's really a remarkable player that's on top of their game, and knows that they expect to be out there and expect to be scoring runs.
Yeah, and then yesterday at Bristol we also saw Lauren Bell and Izzy Wong making their ODI debuts. That was a special moment, wasn't it, Sid?
Yeah, they're the debut twins now. They debuted together in the Test, and there were the photographs of them prior to the Test getting their caps, and now the ODI caps they got this week. So that was really nice to see. They both got their maiden wickets. Izzy Wong certainly made some people feel very uncomfortable, didn't she? Lauren Bell is clearly playing that role in the team where her role is to actually open the bowling and to be sort of metronomic and reliable, and she pretty much is. I think it's there's an interesting thing going on between Lauren Bell and Izzy Wong. What we're seeing with Lauren Bell is that her first couple of overs are really accurate, really good, and she's still, I think, tiring quite quickly. And her third over, she's starting to find it a little bit harder. And by the fourth and fifth over, if she's bowling 4 or 5 overs, then it's definitely harder to keep that degree of concentration up. And that'll come over time as her fitness improves and things. But Izzy Wong's almost the opposite. Izzy Wong almost needs 2 overs of she doesn't get to. Maybe they should send her out to the nets and bowl. It's like in baseball, they put people in a cage and they literally have them pitch right before going out into the middle to actually pitch within the game, and it's almost like that's what Izzy Wong needs. She needs a couple of overs where she can send it down, and it can be almost freebies, And then, when she's into her running, then she's looking very dangerous and very threatening, and certainly made the South African batters feel very uncomfortable and pick up 3 wickets as a reward. So, lots of exciting things happening for England in the bowling department. It is going to be really interesting to see who they play in this third ODI, isn't it? Because, is Catherine Brunt going to come back into the team? You'd expect Catherine Brunt to be playing a big role in the Commonwealth Games. We'll talk about the squad for that in a minute. Will they rest Brunt once more and keep with that bowling attack? Will they bring in an extra bowler? Because perhaps they were lacking that extra bowler, Raf. Nat Siver has been opening the bowling. She did it alongside Catherine Brunt in the first game. She did it alongside Lauren Bell in the second game. And although in the first game she picked up good figures overall and took wickets, in both cases she was expensive opening the bowling. Is that a problem? Do they need to bring in a fifth proper bowler?
Yeah, I think it is a problem, and I think, to be honest, they're expecting too much of her to do that. I don't think that she's an opening bowler, especially in ODI cricket. I think that she isn't somebody who should be bowling in the power play. And I think, to be honest, if you actually asked her, then she might well admit that. And it's lovely because it made for a great headline with her and Catherine Brunt becoming the first ever married couple to open the bowling in international cricket. So that's going to be one for the Wisden Almanac, isn't it? But other than that, really, yes, she's one of our best batters. And I think that she is a good option bowling for the middle overs, but maybe not for the power play. So that is something that England will be needing to think about and perhaps reassessing their strategy. And as you say, from a South African perspective, this has been a bit disappointing. I think somebody was saying that they're actually still ranked above England in the ICC's official ODI rankings, and it really doesn't look like it, does it?
Well, I'm afraid that says more about the ICC's ranking system than it does about England and South Africa, because England are all over South Africa at the moment, and they've got big problems, haven't they? And it was kind of talked about on air yesterday. We've heard this behind the scenes, but it's not a secret anymore. So let's say it. They've got problems that have led to Lizzel Lee retiring when that wasn't intended to be. So we understand what happened is that Lizzel Lee was told that she would need to return to South Africa after this series. She wouldn't get an NOC to play in the 100. An NOC is the no objection certificate, which means that the Cricket South Africa agree to her playing in the 100. Cricket South Africa have to agree to allow her to play. And so they said, we're not going to give you an NOC, you won't be able to play in the 100. The 100 obviously represents a huge chunk of her income. She was going to make like 25,000 or whatever it was, so she was, they're not paid a huge amount of money by their board, these South Africa players. It's a big chunk of their income, threatening to withdraw that. She was like, well, in that case, I'm retiring. South African cricket could still technically not give her an NOC. They could still say no to the knock. But the advice from the ICC is that retired players, that the boards should not deny NOCs to retired players. So she's still here. She was at the game yesterday, wasn't she, Raf? How did she wangle a ticket for that, Raf?
Well, yeah, I asked Marizanne Kemp after play yesterday, were you aware that Lizzel Lee was here? And she said, yes, I bought her the ticket. So, I mean, she was there in the crowd supporting some of her best friends, of which Cap is one, but must have been quite frustrating, you'd imagine. Really, this is an unnecessary thing to happen. Cricket South Africa should not have let relations between them and one of their best players deteriorate to the extent that she felt that she had to retire, and they've really found themselves in dire straits because of that. Marizanne Kemp was actually really interesting after the game yesterday. She said that she's actually really struggling mentally with having lost one of her best friends in the team, Lizzel Lee. She doesn't have her wife, Dane van Neerkerk, with her, and they are used to playing their international cricket together and having each other to rely on. It's a bit like if you weren't there for an entire international summer, Sid. I think I'd feel a bit bereft, if I'm really honest. And we are obviously very lucky, and they are lucky. But when you're used to having somebody like that by your side, and we did hear yesterday the unfortunate news that Dane van Neerkerk is not going to be fit to play in the Commonwealth Games, and Marizanne Kemp said that she was struggling with that as well. That they're going to be, she's not going to be back here as they perhaps hoped that she would be, to share in that big tournament. And Marizanne Kemp, she was great yesterday. If everyone had batted like her, South Africa would have won. They would have chased down that total. She did get a half century, and she was one of the mainstays of the South African batting. She's obviously one of their senior players, but it's really a big mental load for her to take on, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, of course, Lizzel Lee was the biggest run scorer in the entire world in the last calendar year. So you're going to miss that from your team. And as you allude to, it's just terrible man management to get to that situation. I can't believe South African management thought that was what the ultimate upshot was going to be, but they should have seen that coming. And in some ways, that they've only got themselves to blame. And unfortunately, it's really disappointing, the news for Dane van Niekerk, because we were all hoping to see her as part of that. She's still, apparently she's not that far away. There's still a possibility we might see her in the 100, coming over for that to play for the Oval Invincibles, but obviously that's still also up in the air, so we may or may not see that. But we wish her well, and we'd love to see her over here for the 100s if she's able to make it.
I'm sure Marizanne Kapp would as well.
Yes, very much.
Anyway, talking of the Commonwealth Games, we have had the big announcement that we've all been waiting for. It came through at 9 o'clock this morning on Saturday. You're watching this on Sunday, so 24 hours later. And wow, Sid, for the first time, possibly ever, Heather Knight and Lisa Cartley have actually done what you wanted them to do. How does it feel?
Yeah, pretty much. It's a bit scary, actually. We heard about this a few days ago, and I was like, oh my goodness, Alice Capsey is going to be playing for England. And Alice Capsey herself wasn't expecting this, was she? We had a chat to her after the London Cup at the Oval, and she said, something along the lines of, she was hoping that maybe she'd get a debut this summer, but she wasn't really expecting it to come in the Commonwealth Games squad. But here we are, and England have chosen a very positive, a positive young team to take them forwards. But you spoke to Lisa Cartley yesterday, and she was very much insistent that they haven't just picked a young team for experience, have they?
Yeah, it's difficult to know how much of this is talking the talk, because you can imagine that if the England coach said, no, I don't think this is really our best team, I've decided just to pick a team for next year's tournament, and instead there will be uproar. But she was quite insistent that she thinks that this is going to be a team that's going to contain, a squad rather, that's going to contain England's best shot at winning the Commonwealth Games, and does contain their best starting 11 in T20 cricket. And she does not believe that Tammy Beaumont is one of England's best T20 players. That's a big call from Lisa Cartley, actually, because I think that there's going to be quite a lot of people disagreeing with that statement. I know that Tammy Beaumont doesn't have anything like as good a record in T20 cricket as she does in 50-over cricket, but she has been one of those kind of continuity players, and it is going to be really interesting to see how England get on without her.
Yeah, no, well, she's been a crucial player for England in all formats over the last few years, and I've continued to argue that she's been one of England's most significant players. She's been very, very consistent with the bat over all that time. She converts a lot of her 50s to 100s. She was a big part of that huge T20 score that England got against South Africa at Taunton a few years ago. So definitely a player that can play short form cricket. But I wonder if what's going on in England's minds here is that the team that they took out to play the Ashes can't beat Australia. We know that because they've tried to beat Australia and they haven't succeeded. So what we're saying here is, well, the team that we tried, they couldn't beat Australia. Let's try something completely different. And now for something completely different, let's bring in these exciting new talents. In particular, Bryony Smith, we know, can make a lot of runs when it goes right for her. She'll sometimes get out early, as will Alice Capsey, but she'll sometimes be able to hit 40 or 50 off 20 or 30 balls, which is exactly the kind of huge score that we need. And in a sense, England have perhaps taken a little bit of a gamble. They've gone, these are all players that are perfectly capable of maybe hitting like 200 in a T20, which might be too much for Australia on the day. But can they do that? Well, they definitely can. Will they do that? Well, that remains to be seen. And of course, Freya Kemp as well. This is the other really exciting choice. Charlotte Edwards has been banging on at us about Freya Kemp for a couple of years now, but she only really came into the main Vipers squad. She only came into the main Vipers squad this season. She played her first professional matches. She played her first List A match like 3 weeks ago, and now she's going to be pulling on an England shirt. And I fully expect everyone in this squad to play over the next 3 weeks, because we've got 3, 6, hopefully 8 games, providing we make the final, or 8 games even if we make the bronze medal match even. Over the next 3 weeks, I expect everyone to play. I expect Freya Kemp will get her England cap, and what a meteoric rise, because apart from Charlotte Edwards and anyone that she was nudging, going, this girl, well, no, nobody had heard of her, just a couple of weeks ago, and so it's remarkable. She's has the ability to hit and hit big. We saw her play for Southern Vipers at Hove last weekend, and she was smashing the ball into the stands, from the wicket. And there are not many players in the world can do that. Your Lizzel Lees can do that, but not many can. So really excited to see what she can deliver. And of course, batting is only her second suit really, because she's primarily a bowler. She's a left armer, which offers something different. For a young teenager, she's quite able to put the ball in a consistent place. A lot of the time you bring in these tearaway young quicks, and it turns out that they bowl one decent ball in six. Because they're not able to consistently, maintain a line length. She is, while still getting a little bit of pace and a little bit of action on the ball. So a really exciting, positive choice by England, and I for one applaud it.
And what's actually really interesting there, you're talking about Freya Kemp as having been brought in. She's obviously primarily a bowler, but also for her batting. I think that Alice Capsey and Bryony Smith have been brought in because they offer that flexibility as well, but from the opposite perspective. They both offer that off-spin option, don't they? And it sounds to me like Lisa Keightley is hoping that she can draw on those bowling resources as well as those having them as batters. She also talked about them both as potentially floating batters. So floating batters meaning that they can kind of come in anywhere in the order. And I did specifically say to her, is Bryony Smith going to be opening the batting? And looking at the squad, you'd think, well, they've actually really only got two opening batters in there, Bryony Smith and Danny Wyatt. And so that's who I would be expecting to open. But Lisa Keightley refused to be drawn. She said, actually, potentially the great thing about Bryony Smith is that we could have her coming in at 6 or 7 and smashing those boundaries at the opposite end of the innings. And I think Alice Capsey, we know, is she quite likes batting in that number 3 position for the Stars. So potentially that might be where she would sit for England, but it's also possible that they might want her to come in a little bit lower down the order. And so I think what Lisa Keightley is really wanting from these young players is flexibility, the kind of flexibility that England maybe haven't had in the past. And I'm not sure that Tammy Beaumont has offered them that flexibility. She certainly doesn't bowl. She's kind of been the sort of almost like the reserve keeper at times, I guess, but hasn't really been called on to do that. And certainly when they did try that experiment with playing Tammy Beaumont down the order during the 20-over World Cup, it really wasn't seen to have been much of a success. So I guess that's where Lisa Keightley's coming from with the selections.
Yeah, absolutely, and they're all players as well that are looking to go at a strike rate of 100 right from the off. And they're players, there are players out there that will bring themselves up to 100 strike rate after taking 4 or 5 balls. But those 4 or 5 balls, they've concluded, are so crucial if you want to get that extra edge, which is going to allow you to beat Australia. And so she's bringing in players that are capable of going at a strike rate of in excess of 100 from the very first couple of balls. And that's what's so significant about those players as well, and allows them to play anywhere in the order.
Okay, brilliant. Well, it's really exciting squad. We're going to be, really hotly anticipating the start of the Commonwealth Games.
Definitely
now.
Hotly anticipating it.
But I was just going to say that actually I do think it's a little bit disappointing to see that all of those players have been withdrawn from regional cricket in today's round of matches. We've seen that the Stars are really struggling, and that it's just disappointing not to see your best domestic players on show where they can be, where they're not in an England bubble somewhere else. And I guess that's potentially come from the Commonwealth Games Federation, who have organised this big PR marketing day where everyone tries on their kit and has loads of photos taken, but it's still a bit disappointing for me. I wonder if there wasn't another day where they could have found to do it, but hey, them's the breaks.
I'm excited to see the new kit raff. I'm excited to see the girls dressed in an England Commonwealth Games kit. That's going to be a nice one.
I hope that they don't get the Commonwealth Games orange gilet that I've got to wear in my role. Anyway, I'm off to Birmingham tomorrow actually to start my official media games role, because we've got a few days of training beforehand before the games actually start. So I'll be doing that. Sid, you'll be round and about at various different England matches. So the vodcast next week may come to you in a slightly different format, but we will endeavour to do our best to bring it to you anyway. That's all for this week's episode. We're going to go and get very much back in the shade. Bye for now.
Bye.